we'll call the meeting to order at 4:01. And I'm gonna do the roll call. So Member Khan.
Here.
Member Harrison.
Here.
Member Bennell.
Here.
Member Gallinen is absent. Member Hess.
Here.
And Member Gupta.
Here.
Okay, so we have a quorum present. And the first item of business is to elect a chair and a vice chair. So I will take nominations for chair.
I'd like to nominate Daryl, if that's okay.
Carol, would you accept the nomination?
Yes.
Are there any other nominations for chair? If there being nobody else being nominated, is there any objection to Daryl serving as chair? No, Daryl is chair. So now for vice chair, are there any nominations for vice chair?
Any, Christine, would you be interested in serving as chair, vice chair?
Sure, I'll serve as vice chair.
I'll nominate Christine. We worked together in the past and she has a passion for public spaces and history.
Okay, are there any other nominations for vice chair? Hearing none, is there any objection to Member Bennell serving as vice chair? Seeing and hearing none, Member Bennell is elected vice chair. And that brings us down to Robert's Rules, Open Meetings Act, and Ethics Training, which I kind of forgot that I put on the agenda. Again, you guys get stuck with the rookie. So I think that Jasmine has emailed you guys a copy of the Chart of Common Motions.
Oh, cool.
Yes. So with Robert's Rules, I'm going to try to do these each very quickly. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer any questions. There's a couple basic tenets of Robert's Rules. It is that one thing at a time, equal rights for everyone. And there's one other one that I usually say that I can't think of off the top of my head right now, but when you think about equal rights for everyone, if you're taking away some rights of other members, that's when you need a supermajority vote for things. And so the next thing I talk about is that I consider the motions like a ladder. And so a main motion is fairly low on the ladder because most motions can supersede the main motion. And so you have a main motion, and so then you can amend the motion, or you could call the question, or you could call for a point of order. You could all of those, you could refer it to a committee, all of those items, postpone it indefinitely, postpone it to a certain time. All of those motions would supersede a main motion. And then as you work through the motions, you're gonna then come back down. If you've moved to approve something and then you've moved to amend it, and then you've moved to amend the amendment, you're gonna vote on the amended, the amendment to the amendment. And then you're gonna vote on the amendment as amended, and then you're gonna vote on the main motion as amended. Postponing to time certain, you just move the item to another meeting. Postpone indefinitely, according to Robert's Rules, is a subsidiary motion. The assembly has a special rule where it can be a main motion. And so we would need a motion to approve something before we would postpone it indefinitely. If the chair makes a ruling, either there's a point of order because a mistake has been made, or there's a mistake has been made, then you would call for a point of order, and then the chair would rule on the point of order. Another thing would be if you had a conflict of interest, based on your ethics disclosures, you would make your conflict of interest statement. The chair would make a ruling about whether or not you had a substantial interest. And then if you disagree with the chair at that point, you would need to appeal from the decision of the chair. So that needs to be done right away if you have a point of order or have appealed the decision of the chair. And then there's a couple of options to bring things back if you've learned something new that might change your mind. We can amend something previously adopted. If we're still in the same meeting, we can move to reconsider the item. If it's been previously adopted and you just want to make it go away entirely, it could be rescinded. So I think typically things are going to be easy with approving and amending, and I am happy to help provide scripts if there's anything else that you need along the way. Open Meetings Act, quickly. Open Meetings Act is in state law and it's also in the code, and it basically says that 3 members or a majority, whichever is less, cannot talk about a subject that the body is empowered to act on unless you're in a meeting. And so as you guys move through life at this point, you can only communicate with 1 or 2 other people about any particular topic that you would be empowered to act on. If you talk to more than that, it could be considered a serial meeting if you're like by email or if it isn't a publicly noticed meeting. And so if you're going to be at an event, I'm just making this up, but if there was a renaming and you all were invited to go to a grand opening of the renamed space, we would want to publicly notice that with you guys all being there and that type of thing. Just to cover everyone, so that just to play it safe. It's easier to publicly notice and make it safe than it is to deal with having a complaint issued.
Emails count.
And emails count, yeah. So if I CC all of you, I will ask you to please not reply all. I think that's the gist for Open Meetings
I
Act,
think
yeah.
good one. And that all of our meetings have to be publicly noticed.
Yeah, we'll publicly notice all your meetings. So here, by the end of the meeting, we'll get your next few meetings set up.
Do you have my email updated everywhere?
Yes,
Okay.
sorry. We had Gmail in her and she's not Gmail. That's true.
Oh, hi.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, so I was staff to the Anchorage Historic Preservation Commission for quite a few years, as Daryl was before I came along. And one of the issues that we had come up was this meeting through an email. So we also have to be very careful, and I think you kind of touched on it. Don't have a meeting on email. So if something gets sent out, you can't comment back on it. You have to save your comments for the in-person meeting that we have. We got kind of a little bit scary territory on a couple of things, and there were a few commissioners on my commission that were not very happy with me when I had to shut them down a couple of times, but we just have to be careful of that too.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
You have to give public notice. When you had called me about setting this meeting, you were like, I need so many days.
Yeah.
How many?
It's 48 hours. We typically try to do it a week in advance, but it was Friday afternoon and I needed to get it, needed to get it done.
Yeah, the muni, there's the minimum, but 95% of the time we go with a week or 2 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah,
I give maximum notice to.
board meetings are 48 hours minimum. And again, we try to do 7, and then often because it's regular meetings and you meet at a specific day and time of the month, we just schedule all of them out. And then that way they can be updated, or if we needed a special meeting, that's 24-hour notice.
And commission meetings are noticed on 2 calendars on muni.org.
Yes, the public notice page and the events calendar. Okay, are we ready to move on to a little bit of ethics? This is something else that was emailed to you folks online. This is the disclosure of economic interest in a municipal contract or business by a public servant. And so we will need for you to complete this form and submit it. You can submit it to the clerk's office. You can either email it to me, or you can, if you're gonna print it out and fill it out, you can hand deliver it to the clerk's office, which is Suite 250 next door. And this is given to the Board of Ethics and they just review them and file them away. And so if you have a conflict being, interest in a municipal contract, or how you engage with the municipality, we would just need to know that, to be sure that you are properly excused off when needed. Additionally, if you were to have a conflict that arises through your work, you would need to disclose that right away when we get to that item on the agenda. I don't, like, if, for example, if I can't think of anything because this is kind of all public places. I can't imagine, you could have a personal interest, I guess, in, if we were gonna rename a park, Daryl Hess Park. Daryl might have a personal interest in that outcome. And so he would need to declare a potential conflict of interest for the body to consider. There's a series of questions that we would go through to determine if he had a substantial interest in the matter. And then the chair would rule, or the vice chair would rule in this situation if he's chair, whether or not he had a substantial conflict of interest in order to recuse him off of voting on that matter.
If somebody related to was bringing a petition forward, for instance,
Yeah.
you probably want to disclose that. If you're, I mean, the substantial part is hard to know, and so you want to just disclose. But even if, for instance, there was a park and your house is right across the street from it, you know, that may be considered, an interest. So it's probably better to just to disclose.
It is best to disclose and let the body make the decision. Because that's gonna, if they order you to vote on it, then you've done your duty by just disclosing it, and it keeps you in the clear. Any questions about that? Okay, I can be done then.
All right, well, thank you, Jamie. You know, before we go further on the agenda, could we go around real quick and introduce ourselves, you know, just a couple of minutes, who we are and why you were interested in serving on this commission? And can we start with Kuku and Christine online?
Yeah, thank you, Daryl. Well, I know some of you. My name's Kuku Gupta. I have been in Anchorage for 7 years now. And I moved here right out of college, and I studied comparative literature in college, which was a lot around the idea of naming, um, uh, specifically with historical context, or context around colonialism, context around political climate of things. We focused on literature and art and films. And, you know, being originally from India, I have a lot of thoughts on how we are connected with the space and place that we belong in, and how they're represented also represent our identities. So one of my friends told me about the existence of this commission, and she was like, you know what, Cuckoo, I think you'd be great in it. And so she encouraged me to apply, Alyssa Hartman, and here I am. So yes, I work at Rural Cap. I'm a youth community programs manager there, and yeah, that's me. Thank you, Daryl.
Thank you, Kuku. Christine?
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Daryl and Cameron. My name's Christine Bonnell. I live in College Village, and I've been in Alaska for going on 15 years. I moved here when my granddaughter Scarlett was 1.5 years old. She is now taller than I am, and just fabulous, as well as her brother Max, who's a couple of years younger. We live 2 streets apart, so it's fun to be here. Really important for family. I was with the Muni for almost 13 years. Like I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, I was the staff person for the Anchorage Historic Preservation Commission. And during that time, we accomplished quite a bit with the commission. We adopted the original Neighborhoods Historic Preservation Plan, if any of you have heard of that. We we completed a interpretive plan that goes along with that plan. We had 2 or 3 historic districts nominated to the National Register and approved. And I also wrote the ordinance that adopted the local landmark ordinance and that nomination process. So anyway, now I'm retired, and I'm actually working on the Midtown District Plan, trying to get that to planning and zoning so it can go to the assembly here this summer. And I was asked to be on because I was basically the historic preservation officer for the Muni for so many years. And Cameron and Dr. Volan thought I'd be great in this position, and they knew I was leaving the Muni. So anyway, yeah, it's fun to be here, and I think we're going to accomplish great things. Thank you.
Chris. Jennifer, you want to go next?
Sure. I've been in Alaska my whole life. I've been in Anchorage all except for 10 years. So I've lived in Opadiarman. I've lived on the east side. I currently own a house in Government Hill, so that's where I am now. For the 10 years that I wasn't here, I lived out in Sutton and Chicklin. And when I lived out there, I served on the Historic Preservation Commission for the Mat-Su.
Oh.
And I actually spent some time living at the Alpine Historical Park there in Sutton, which you manage this historical area of buildings. I have a degree in anthropology, and I've been working for tribes and tribal health organizations my whole career. 2 of them being Eklutna and Chicklin, so nearby ones. But I currently work for Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium. I'm the senior community liaison, and that involves traveling throughout the entire state. I travel a lot. Visiting mostly now, we're focused on what we call first service communities, which are communities that are getting piped water and sewer for the first time. So I'm going to the really small remote ones at this time. But I was just interested because I read the list of criteria, and I was like, check, check, I was like, everything seemed to be saying all my interests and things. And so I was like, oh, maybe you guys should apply.
Oh, I'm glad you did. And Selma, are you Selma?
Yeah, you don't want to introduce yourself?
Come back to me.
My name is Selma Khan. I'm originally from Barrow, now known as Calvic. Came to Anchorage to attend college and haven't left at all. So I'm still here, thriving. I actually saw a similar story to Jennifer, saw the list of open commission seats. And I actually have my undergrad in anthropology from UAA, so I was able to actually have real life Anchorage experience with that degree. I also have my master's degree in HR management, so by day to day, I'm an HR director. Right now, I'm more at TDX. Previously, I know Cuckoo because I was the HR director at RollCap. But my interests, I'm an anthropology nerd. Secretly, but I'm HR all day. And yeah, that's my spill.
Thank you. Well, I'm Daryl Hess, and I've lived in Anchorage. It'll be 60 years this August. I've worked for the municipality for the last 17 years. The first year and a half, I worked in economic and community development. Mountain View Library was one of my projects, and helping Credit Union One open the first banking institution in Mountain View in 25 years. And then I was appointed as the city's first homeless coordinator for 3 years. And since 2012, I've been the ombudsman for the municipality. But I also, one of my other duties as assigned at one point was historic preservation officer before Christine and I staffed the commission. I've always had an interest in history. With a few friends, we started a cemetery tour 3 years ago called Soul in the Cemetery, and we visit only African Americans on that tour. So this June will be our third tour. So I have a great interest in local history, and I've been involved in a lot of public namings over the years. And the process has always troubled me, the way we would create these ad hoc panels for a specific naming, because somebody would pass away and you would have grieving family members or friends or business partners come to the assembly and the administration. They would form this panel, they would serve on it, and the outcome was predetermined. And because the way the system worked, invariably 95% of our namings were for older white males. So the naming process has not been very inclusive, has had a particular Western European focus. And so about 4 years ago, and this is why I'm waiting for Cameron to introduce himself last, Cameron and I started talking about this issue, and we both had similar concerns. So he spearheaded the Assembly's major rewrite of the public naming code. And that's one of the reasons I know Cameron's here tonight, because he wants to assist us as we start developing the work, plan for the commission. So with that, Cameron, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm Cameron. I grew up in Barrow and have been on the Assembly, and I've lived in Anchorage now for, 15, maybe 20 years now. I think that one of the things that would be really helpful to all of you is to spend a little bit of time on this context, like what was it like before? And I don't know if folks know what it was like before, but it's worth spending some time on it and understanding why it needed to change and what was wrong with it. The result of it, Daryl talks about in that we just had a city that was the naming of everything was not representative of the city and of our history and of the first people who were here and all of these things. And so I felt more and more the impact that was having on our children, on our community, on tourism, on all kinds of things. And so but the other part was that so there was an opportunity to really change that, but the system itself was not only not only the result, but it was, as Daryl was saying, it was, our softball coach got hit by a car and it's really sad. And his name is Billy. And so it was, I'm going to name that park Billy, right? Billy had only lived in Alaska 2 years, and had just come here, right? But everybody was really emotional about Billy had just died. And so they would pull a group together, including Billy's sister and Billy's mom. And that would be the committee, right? And they would have a couple of meetings and they'd say, well, we want to name this park after him. And they'd come to the assembly and it was a foregone conclusion that was going to happen, right? And that happened over and over and over and over again. And then the other things would happen, like we've seen it in recent terms, like when there's a lot of political pressure to name something after somebody after they pass away. We saw it with Don Young, right? And so I just felt like there needed to be a different way to do this, and that it was more fair, and that it was involved more people, and there was some long-term planning. I went to Denver years ago and lived there, and I attended a 2-day workshop there, and the whole city, everybody was there, people from all businesses, and they were like, what's the identity of Denver? Like what is Denver all about? And how do we represent that in our public art, in our naming, our everything? So it was really well thought out. And I really think that that's what we need as a city. We need a city that has a clear identity that's more than just settlers, right? And I think that this can be inclusive of a lot of our history. It doesn't have to just be one history. So I'm here just because I'm really interested in this work and I want to support it as much as I can. I want to support all of you in this work. I just wanted to say that the processes that you would set up, it's written, some of the things are written in the code, but a lot of it is you have to design it. You have to design a process and a system that you think will be really great after you leave, right? So this is one of the things why I think a lot of you were selected, because I feel like a lot of you have the skills, experience, HR experience, these kinds of things that seriously that like will allow this to be a solid process and system. Inclusive, right? And so that it can't be challenged every single time, and so that's a big part of the beginning of it, is setting it up right, and making sure that it's done right. And then the other thing is that I think over time, my hope is that we'll start to see things change in our city, and we'll see a better distribution of names and that sort of thing. So that's my hope. And so I'm just here my hope is that I can just attend your meetings and provide any help that I can and support, but not get in your way.
And I think one of the major goals when the assembly did the rewrite was to try to step back from the focus on naming after individuals and look more at cultural, historic context, even animals, natural features versus individuals.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. And yeah, we're not going to go I think just real quick to build on that, because that's something that I forgot, is that there is a real culture built around naming people after people die, right? And if you think about what that culture is doing to our cities, it's Michael J. Fox Highway and Billy Joe's, building, and all of a sudden you have this lack of identity. It's just these literally names, and instead of really thoughtful, like, why is that named that? And especially when you go back to indigenous names, there are names that were relevant to that. That's what that is. That's why it's there. It's rarely named after a person. So, but I really appreciate that, and I think that partly the writing of this is saying there should be opportunities for people. Like when my sister died, we like paid for a little thing of road, right? And that was cool. I mean, it's like a little piece of the road. You get a little sign, a memorial thing, but I don't want a street name. You know what I mean? I don't. So I think that's a really important point. Is this group beginning to, with the community, with others, envision a new way of doing this that's really representative of our city. So Thanks for letting me say that.
Christine, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, real quick. And if you folks don't know, we don't have to start at, point zero. Because Shem Pete's Alaska is, I mean, if you're aware of that book, Cuckoo, I'm not sure if you are. It has, the place names and everything else that we can lean to. And, throughout this part of Anchorage. And we actually have a foundation for doing this too in our planning processes. I mentioned the original neighborhoods historic preservation plan. We talk in there about doing renaming and how that should be supported in those 4 original neighborhoods, which are downtown Government Hill, South Edition, and Fairview. And so, we're not going to be starting at zero. We've already got some background for us to do that. And two real quick things. Daryl moved here soon after the Alaska earthquake, the great earthquake in '64. And I just want you to know that he slept with his shoes on for quite a while because they were afraid the earthquake was going to happen again. And I only know this because I helped write Government Hill yesterday, today, and today, or whatever it is. And we interviewed Daryl for that.
So thank you, Christine.
It sounds like it's putting all the pieces of the puzzle together.
Yeah, I think this is what's great. I think this is a great group of people. We have I think a broad skill set, which is why I wanted all of us to introduce ourselves, because we're gonna, as Cameron said, we're gonna build the foundation for the future. Then this is an important, I think this is an important commission that's gonna help, I think, create an identity for our community.
And Daryl, just a couple of the things I think are really helpful. One is that that this inherently is gonna sometimes become a political process, as you can imagine. The people on this group and the work of this group there's gonna be times when we're gonna get pretty significant pushback. And so I think just sort of like preparing for that. But I'm hoping that this commission is also really bold in its work, and that we are pushing back against decades and decades and decades of naming. When you look at the original law that was put into place in the 80s and some of the names on there you recognize some of the names who are on there, it was built around let's have a priority for historic Anchorage family names.
Mhm.
So Marston and Godstein and others, right? So those names were Sullivan, like these names had a high priority in all of it. And so that's one of the reasons why you see that. And they were built around, in some ways, giving access to this to some and not access to others. And so I just really, really encourage the commission to be bold in that the only way we're going to get to a place where we have a more representative distribution of names is if we think about what the priorities should be, which is one of the reasons why the code was written in the way it was, right? The code was written to make sure that we had voices on this commission that brought experience and passion around ensuring that this was a group that prioritized groups that have been underrepresented in the past.
From my perspective, I think one of the things we're going to have to deal with as a commission in the near future is requests to rename, because so many parks and facilities were named decades ago, and the majority of the current residents in Anchorage have no idea who the individuals were, or why they were named what they were named. Or I don't know about any of you, but I hear comments from some of my Indigenous friends regarding Centennial Park, which was named in 1966 for the 100th anniversary of the Alaska Purchase in 1967. For a lot of Indigenous peoples, that's not something they celebrate. So that there are certain names on some parks and facilities in Anchorage that don't resonate with a lot of people. So we may have to look, like Cameron's talking about being bold, we may have to look at recommending renaming some facilities, and I hope we will do that. Any other comments? The next topic is prepare a statement of vision for naming of public places. So there is isn't there a purpose statement in the code? That we could, rather than reinventing the wheel, we could probably expand on that.
Edit.
Or
I
using
did
I.
read
But I was gonna bring a
I did
copy of the
but
code
I
and
didn't
I
bring it.
forgot.
Yeah, if you haven't, it's probably good to have a,
Yeah, reading the code was basically why I wanted to join too. I read it and go, oh, okay, this is what they're doing. I'll be part of it.
So as far as a vision statement for naming public places, I think that purpose in the code, we could probably look at that and expand on it. And I don't know if that's something we want to dive into tonight, or would a couple of commissioners be interested in taking that on? Because if we form a committee, I believe, Jamie, if it's only 2 members, it doesn't have to be noticed when they meet. So if a couple of commissioners are interested in taking that on and having a draft to us by our next meeting, it might save us, if we don't want to dive into it tonight. What do you all think?
You could like set a timer and say, we're gonna talk about it for
Sure.
10 minutes so that
Yeah.
so that everyone could like put their input
Awesome,
and then do a group
awesome.
that splits off.
We can do that. So does
Is this what you were talking about? It's
purpose in the code?
180-020 policy. When considering the naming or renaming of a public place, the preferred practice shall be to impart public property with a sense of historical, cultural, or geographical significance, considering location, function, the traditional indigenous place name, or natural features. Is that what you were thinking?
Yes. Any comments?
Is there a way to like share your screen?
Yeah, Jasmine, it's 180-020 C.
And is this a permanent vision statement or?
Well, I think if the commission could, future commissions or this commission could always amend it, change it.
Can you hit control and then probably scroll the mouse up and make it bigger? Oh, too big. Went too fast.
Where'd it go?
It's further down. The one that she had highlighted.
To jump. 180-020 C. Crazy place.
It's
Right, it's
under Title I.
Historical, cultural, geographical.
If you want to copy and paste it and put it in Word. Yeah.
anybody ever used Chat GPT?
Yeah, I use like crap.
I just put the whole thing into Chat GPT and said, please write a vision for us.
I use the crap out of it.
And this is what it said. It says,
I tell everyone to use it.
the
too.
Public Naming Commission envisions a city where the names of our shared spaces reflect the full story of Anchorage, honoring the deep history, diverse cultures, and natural landscapes that define this place. Through thoughtful, inclusive, and transparent processes, we seek to elevate traditional Indigenous place names, recognize meaningful and local narratives, and connect our public spaces to community identity, vision, and values. Our work is grounded in the belief that naming is more than symbolic. It is an act of recognition, a tool for education, and a way to foster belonging. We are committed to building a legacy of names that reflect who we are, where we come from, and where we're going together.
I need that
Very good,
application.
yeah. I've seen work that they've
Wow.
done, it's very good.
That's
The only problem
great.
is it's.
All
You
right,
could ask for it too.
I like it.
I like it.
You could ask for it to shorten it.
Yeah, shortening.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow. Yeah, it's a little long, but it's great.
Oh,
Vision usually is shorter, so you
Like
can
2
like
sentences.
memorize it.
Yeah.
I don't think I can memorize that.
We envision an Anchorage where the names of public places reflect our shared history, honor Indigenous place names, and connect meaningfully to the land, people, and values of our community. Through thoughtful, inclusive processes, we aim to build a legacy of names that tell the story of who we are.
It's very good.
I like
I
that.
like that too.
Yeah.
Any-
I really liked that the original one had foster belonging in it. But I also just find this really dystopic that as a naming commission, we're going to ChatGPT for our vision. I think that's just a little ironic, but yeah, I really liked the foster belonging aspect in the first one.
Is there a way to work it into the second version
Yeah.
without making it?
Much longer, yeah. Sorry. No, thank you.
No, I like fostering belonging too. That was one of the purposes of changing the code, was to give people
Yeah.
a sense of
I was
belonging.
thinking of that youth a couple of years ago who had I read their article in ADN, and they had that street name change to one of the Harry Potter names, and they talked about how they felt like a connection and belonging, with the land. And so that kind of stuck out to me because of it. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
Mhm.
we do, because we do the street name renaming.
So do we,
Hold on, try this.
Do you want to go ahead and like print out the vision and get it to us next month? Let us kind of cook on it a little bit.
yeah, let's do that.
Send out if there.
We have, this is a good draft, and we could all
Mhm.
think about potential edits, and then it could be an action item on the next agenda.
You know,
Sounds very DI too.
I felt motivated listening to it.
Yeah.
I think of the other
you
side.
know, DEI is actually in the code. Did you see that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
naming.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, we could also, say,
Yeah.
hey, yeah, it's on the, yeah.
I will, yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna move on to
Yeah.
D. Naming implementation goals and strategy development.
Sounds heavy.
Yeah, that's what I
Well,
was
these are
thinking.
the steps to reaching that.
Yeah. So how do we reach our vision statement?
I mean, a lot of it is in the code, I think, to start with.
I was gonna say, I also got a little creative one night and decided I wasn't gonna print this out for you, but now I'll have Jasmine put it up there, but I
The
spent
document you developed?
exactly 7 minutes in ChatGPT. Plugged the code in, and it came up with,
I love this. I've only used it once.
No,
so
I
far.
love the
You're
crap
gonna
out of
use
it.
I've
twice
gotta
in
check
15
this out.
minutes.
It's,
I have a very
be
direct
careful
code.
with it
Yeah.
because it lies.
Because,
It doesn't always tell you the truth.
oh,
It makes things up at times.
But
It's best to have
it's
a
good for
draft
the
before
right-
you do it.
For editing and things like
Yeah,
that.
it's best to have a draft or exactly what you need.
Research. It's several times it's given me research that it made up and it told me it was written by something and I
It's
went and
just-
looked it up and it was not.
But if you have a fridge full of food that you're trying to get rid of, you could just say, I have all this food, give me a
Well, I need to
recipe
get
and
out
I'll
of
get
it.
the recipe.
There you go.
oh,
I do it all the time.
so,
But yeah, the code has very specific sort of steps and guidelines
Mm-hmm.
and things to just kind of start with.
so is Jasmine gonna put up the
Yeah.
document? Cool. So once again, I think this is a document that we can think about.
yeah, I can email it out.
And come-
If you guys like it, then we can email it out and you guys can edit it further or suggest further edits.
I don't know what you're- 6 of
It
which-
was.
So did you ask it to give you goals and strategy development or?
Yeah. Yeah, so
Okay.
goals, so develop and adopt formal naming and renaming criteria, define what types of public places are eligible, ensure criteria include diversity, equity, and cultural sensitive principles. Finalize and distribute a submission form, create a communications plan to inform the public, agencies, and stakeholders, set a clear deadline for initial submissions to be considered in the upcoming work plan, review proposed names and places, schedule at least one public hearing to identify additional potential names, request advisory opinions from community councils, parks and recreation commissions, and boards of supervisors. Create a scoring rubric to evaluate proposals based
Oh,
on
that
approved criteria. Review submissions on a rolling basis, flag submissions that require further research or engagement. Compile all findings, submissions into a structured outline, submit report to the assembly by August 31st, and submit memorandums outlining the commission's recommendations to the assembly for approval.
No. I mean, it's a starting point.
So that's in Word and yeah,
Yeah.
anyways, I could email, if any of that sounded interesting or correct, you can email it out and you guys can make edits.
Mr. Chair, I'm willing to be on a subcommittee to look at this, maybe with somebody else. And, because, you know, there is a naming commission for the state. I'm not quite sure what all their foundational documents are or something like that, but I think it might be good to take a look at what they have versus what this has too.
I think that's a great idea. Who, is anybody interested in serving with Christine on a two-person subcommittee to work on this?
I've spent a lot of time writing goals and objectives for projects, but I'm about to go to Seattle and drive through Canada for the next week.
Okay.
I don't
I'm not gonna
mind.
be here.
I don't mind.
Selma has volunteered.
Oh, okay, great,
Perfect. And
great.
then the two of you can come at our next meeting. You'll have something, some suggestions for us to review.
Sounds good. Selma, we'll probably need to meet up somewhere, but we can figure that out after.
So I'm sure the clerk's office can connect the two of you electronically, so you
Okay,
can have each
yeah.
other's contact information.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? Are we expecting our goals to be SMART goals that are measurable and time bound? Because these aren't time bound. They don't have like deadlines. I'm just giving them guidelines for their subcommittee. Do they have to be like, develop and adopt formal naming and renaming criteria by July 15th?
I think we could provide that context if we need to, because some of this will be, like they said, straightforward out of the code and just reiterated.
I just noticed that August 31st. So is all of this stuff supposed to be done by August 31st? If so, we might need like a timeline of like,
So the August 31st is, I think that's when the annual work plan has to be submitted to the assembly.
Right, I think ideally the code would envision that, you know, September 1, you start on your next year. And so since we're starting in April, or May now, you can either rush it and get to there or
Yeah, you can either.
get to August and get them what you've done and then start
Continue.
for the next
Well,
year.
I think some of
Yeah.
these, like, develop and adopt formal naming, renaming criteria, that's potentially a one time. We
That's,
might wanna
yeah, and
amend
that's an
in the future.
action. That's an action. To
Yes.
me, it's not a goal. I mean,
Yeah.
it could be a goal, but to me, as I'm looking at some of these, that's why I thought I'd volunteer for a subcommittee. Is some of them to me are actions that we need to get done before we can even, you know, get a nomination, right?
Right.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to overtalk you.
No, you're correct. Some of these we can put, you know, deadlines on we want to meet. but others that are ongoing, there's not necessarily a deadline for them.
Does that answer your question, Jennifer?
Yeah, I just thought we should have a little bit more discussion.
Can you make sure you send the Word doc with us to me and Christine?
Mhm.
Thank
I'm
you.
working on that right now.
Well,
I just have to remember Christine's email.
and I have a question. I'm puzzled. The way some things are worded and then the discussions I've seen in some emails, are we going to do an annual plan where we consider all renamings and make recommendations at one time, or do we look at individual nominations during the year?
Yeah.
I think that's an important, something that we need to really discuss at our next meeting when we look at the goals and strategies.
Yeah, you
is-
and I talked about that when we first were talking about this, because I remember that I think the goal was to not be too reactive, right? So that it isn't, you're not just reacting to everybody's what they're doing, but you're thinking about what are all the places that need to be named? Where are all the requests of people that want to be, and so that, and people can say, I want my mom to be named after something. I'm not sure what it is. Here's an idea, or I want this bridge or this thing. But so you're collecting that and you're not being super reactive, right? So that you can, at some point, I think, bring a plan to the assembly that says, here's the 6 places that we'd like to name. Here are the we've gone through this process, da, 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 da. But then I think there has to be some level of responsiveness to things that happen throughout the year, you know, and so how do you respond to that? So I think that's a really good question.
So the other thing too, and this is relating to the local landmark register. So we created the nomination form, kind of what you sent to us, but then I created a director's guidance on how to fill out the form. Because with the nomination form, there's a lot of justification. And I think that we would want, with a nomination for a renaming or a naming, we want to know the story. And that's not 2 or 3 sentences. That's going to be, you know, a narrative that people have to produce for us, and maybe photos and, you know, some background information or whatever. So I don't think we should anticipate that a nomination is just going to be the 1 page and that's going to be the end of it. You know, one of those action items, even though we have a nomination form, we say, okay, this is a nomination form, but then we got to figure out, then we got to tell people how to figure out and what they need to provide when they nominate something.
I think we're talking about that with E.
Yeah. So I think, were there any more comments on D real quick? I think we're gonna have the subcommittee's gonna look at the draft document Jamie put together and come back to us with some recommendations at our next meeting. So then we'll move on to what, Christine, what you're talking about is item E on the agenda, is the submission form.
Right. Yeah.
So, any other thoughts on the submission form?
I do agree with.
Yeah, I'd personally like to take a little bit of time to look at it and then do a comparison between the local landmark nomination form that we created. And because like I said, we had to add like 2 or 3 pages to that nomination form for the local landmark ordinance, so that we could explain to people what information they need to include in there. And so to me, I don't anticipate that just being 1 page. It could be 2 to 3 pages. But then again, the guidance on how to fill it out and what is expected as far as information goes. And then we have to give in the nomination form, and I apologize, I didn't have a chance to look at it thoroughly. You know, we need to give them the parameters and how the choices are going to be made and stuff like that too. So, yeah, I'd like to look at that a little bit more. But can we put it up and talk about it for a minute? Do we have time, or are we We have
Yeah.
4 minutes.
Let's put it up. Any other thoughts on the form? Jennifer?
In one of the goals, it talked about criteria, having a matrix criteria. And so that seems to be missing from here. It doesn't, like you said, it doesn't have instructions. It doesn't say, like, I would expect us to, I would expect us to have criteria and then they would have to check off, like, yeah, it meets that criteria, it meets this criteria, it meets this
Mhm.
criteria.
Before even submitting it.
Yeah.
You know, I was just sitting here thinking, in the code, there's a list of 8 or 9 things. It used to be when we had these ad hoc public naming panels, in the report that went to the assembly and the administration, you had to say how you address each of these criteria, like was there any indigenous significance, to indigenous cultures of this place? Or did the person you recommend, what was their connection to this space? So I like Christine's idea of having some sort of a document that says a good nomination packet would include, or something that gives some direction and address how this proposed naming would meet each of these goals that are in the code. Because the naming panels used to have to outline how the proposed naming met these goals. So if somebody's nominated, that would actually help the commission, I think, as we looked at nominations, if they articulated how that proposed naming would meet the goals in the code.
Well, and also the vision for the program too.
Yeah.
I mean, and that can be a little bit, kind of esoteric or something for somebody to try to figure out. So that's why it's good to have that. I'm saying director's guidance because we were in the planning department, but I think we should call it the chairman's guidance or something like that, or commission guidance or something like that.
Commission guidance.
Yeah. And I can put the link to the local landmark register. I'll send it when we get done, and then you all can take a look at that, and then you can see what I'm talking about. We tried not to make it really, really complicated, but I will tell you, when you have 2 archaeologists and 2 historians and 3 architects on a commission, stuff gets complicated.
So am I the only one that I just had a concern? I wasn't sure about the requirement for a map, or the application was incomplete if there was no map. Is everybody going to have the ability to pull a map? I mean, to pull a map or find a map or?
So, that could be in the guidance if the area or the object or whatever it is, a rock or I don't know what, isn't on a regular map, they could go use Google Earth or something like that. And then we could tell them that would be adequate, I guess. We just have to figure that out.
Yeah, it's just the language that it's incomplete without a map.
And that's the other
Works with
thing
that.
too, is staff could help them, do a map too. I mean, in the planning department, I could do that, but I don't know about the clerk staff if they could do that.
Well, I think most spaces are going to have an address. Parks all have addresses.
Yeah.
Streets have a current name. Buildings have an address and don't have a name. Unless it's an open space with no street address, I don't think you're going to necessarily need a map.
Yeah. This was another thing that came entirely out of ChatGPT. And so I can easily remove that requirement and just make it a suggestion.
Or encouraged.
Encourage a map, or require a map if the proposed, the facility or location to be named doesn't have a street address.
highly encouraged to provide a
Yes.
photo or something of that. or
Yes, I
that.
just think requiring it or else is,
Sure, and then I can also go back in and add I see the 6 criteria now and just add those. And give them a space for a narrative statement for each of the 6 criteria and
That's
ask,
what I was-
and just say,
perfect,
attach additional pages if necessary. for each of
perfect,
their
yeah, that'd
attachments.
be
Okay.
great.
Mhm.
So then this will be 2 pages now.
It might be a lot more.
Yeah,
Also, you mentioned like everything has an address. You could say location, address, or description of public space so that we know that there's.
yes,
That address is a
Yes.
good way to fill out that box.
yes.
I have a clarifying question, and I'm sorry if I'm putting the cart before the horse, but are we expecting then that they have to meet all the criteria points, or is it that they can meet 4 out of the 6 and we would still be able to consider it? Does that make sense?
Well, those are criteria that are to be considered, but the code does not say they have to meet all of the criteria. So we as a commission, if we want to set some standards and say the policy of the commission is we don't approve proposed naming unless they meet 3 of the 6 criteria or 4, but then somebody might challenge us that the code doesn't require that you meet all of them. You just have, you're supposed to take those 6 items, 6 criteria into consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Daryl, it says considerations in the selection of a name shall include.
Yeah.
And I don't see it and, just.
So, but I think as a commission, we have a public hearing and we would discuss a public naming proposal and we vote on it. And that could be an issue, that we could discuss, I think at that point is, wow, this proposal meets one of the 6 criteria that's supposed to be considered. I don't think it meets the threshold. And I think that's a decision that would be up to the commission. But that's a good point, is there's nothing in code that says that a proposed naming has to meet any or all of the criteria. It's just the criteria has to be considered. So that's kind of a policy decision for the commission as we move forward, I would think. What do you, Cameron? We're talking about, does proposed naming have to meet 4 of the 6 criteria in the code or 3? And
I see.
we're not required to meet any of them, but if we have a public hearing and we consider a naming and we say, wait, this proposal only meets one of the criteria, I don't think it really meets the intent of the code.
Yeah, I mean, I think you want to have you want it to be defensible, right? You want to create something that will give you a basis for where you came to that decision, so that you can demonstrate that it's fair and everybody has gotten the same. So that's that. But what that is I think is up to you in terms of how you decide, as long as it's meeting the spirit of the code. Yeah, so, but I think you want to. I think that's part of the decision making that has to come from this group.
Yeah, and as we're making a recommendation, the commission to the assembly and administration, we have to be able to defend that recommendation and say, wow, this meets 5 of the 6 criteria that are supposed to be considered in the code. This is a strong naming proposal.
Yeah. And I think one of the things you're gonna, I mean, these are just the things you're gonna have. You're gonna get, hey, you named these last 2 things in this way. That's not fair. You didn't name this thing that way, right? I mean, this whole thing. And so you want to come up with some language that allows you to, to make thoughtful decisions about why you've done what you've done. And the challenge with doing it this way is that before, all the responsibility was just on the family to just, that sort of thing. There was nothing. But this way, you want to be able to have a justification for why you chose what you chose, because somebody, you're going to have to say no to some folks, and you're going to have a reason for that.
So
I was just thinking about it actually happening, and I was also thinking that there could be a time. So let's say you get one that only meets 1 criteria, and you're like, wow, it only meets one criteria. How about if we leave it open for another 30 days or 60 days and see if there's any other suggestions that meet more of the criteria?
Yeah.
But okay, it's been 60 days, it's been 90 days, whatever we choose. And no one came forward with any other names. No one's interested in this particular park except for you, and you only meet one criteria. But we gave everyone a chance. And
Well, you think about the example. So let's just say you have 20 people that have come forth and said, I want something named after my uncle or whatever, right? I mean, so you've got those, you got a list of people, and maybe they even have suggestions of what they want named, right? And then you may have a list of places that need to be named, or that they don't have a name, or there's been a request to rename it because there's something. So you have like places, like you got people and you got places maybe, and then you've got these things that you're balancing, and the other piece is that you don't have to name it. You could hold that. Thank you for your thank you for your idea. We really love the wonderful idea. We don't feel like there's a place right now for us to do that. So we're going to hold you. We're going to keep you in the queue for a while, that sort of thing. I don't know. So that's where I don't know if there's a determination of like, this has to be named by this time frame. So those are all I think factors and variables that you're going to have to sort of figure out is what is that time frame. And I think at the end of the day, my hope, and I think a lot of our hope, is that you won't be pressured into doing something, or you won't be forced. Like you'll make thoughtful decisions about where to put names and why.
And I think if I remember the code correctly, we have an obligation as a commission, if there's a proposal that we're looking at, considering, and there's, we have a public hearing, we also have to consider all other naming proposals for that facility or location that members of the public bring forward. So somebody might be proposing naming the ball fields after Billy.
Right.
But then members of the public come and say, I want to name it after Jack. And so the commission would have to consider both proposals.
Yeah.
And that's why I like Jennifer's idea of maybe before final action, you have a 30-day period or a 60-day period, and you see if there's any more proposals from the public.
I think, especially because people are used to it, a really likely scenario is you have the Sunshine Park, right? That's been named Sunshine Park forever. And then you have people in that neighborhood who come forward and they say, I want to name it after someone who's passed or whatever, and I want to name it Billy Park, right? And there's no other options coming forward. That's it. But as a commission, what's your responsibility, right? Is Sunshine Park, is there a significance to that? Is there a reason that was there? Why was it named Sunshine Park? Is there, if you're going to enter into the process of renaming, then it's your responsibility, I think, to go, okay, what other names could it be or should it be? If we're going to rename it, if it's just because Billy has come forward doesn't mean it's the only choice. There's probably some original name for that area. There's probably some other things. So that's what's going to be tough, I think, is that you may not have a competing person or group, but just naming it because it's the only name that came forward is, I think, what we're trying to avoid.
I think that was one of the intentions of having a commission, a naming commission, is because in the past with the ad hoc naming panels and it had family members, business partners, neighbors, you knew what the outcome was going to be. So just because, I think that's our prerogative reading the code, is if somebody proposes naming it Billy Park and the commission thinks it doesn't meet the criteria, there's not a real connection between Billy and this park, it doesn't meet the intent of the code, the commission can vote not to move that to the assembly.
Right. And that's why I'm curious about your processes, because if in that process, someone said, well, Sunshine Park was, nobody likes that name or nobody wants that name. So does the park need to be renamed? Like, what's the process to go to a renaming? Does it have to be generated by a community member, or can the commission do that? Or like, what generates that renaming process? But I think the most common thing you're going to find initially is people doing what they've always done. And that is coming forward and asking you to rename things or name things. And so that's what's in that will likely be the thing will happen. The other work you're doing in terms of making some decisions about name changes or that sort of thing, that's going to be interesting to figure out where that comes from.
Well, I would think the commission, we have the authority, the right to proactively make recommendations to the assembly and the administration, like Centennial Park. For me personally, I personally think that park needs renamed. Here's an example, Bayshore Community Council passed a resolution recently. They want to rename KFQD Park. So KFQD radio was in Spenard. KFQD Park is way out in South Anchorage, and people in the neighborhood going, why is it named KFQD Park? So they want to name it Bayshore Park. And I was talking to a couple of the council members, and I said, the school, it's near the elementary school, their mascot is a bear. Why don't you find out what the Upper Cook Inlet Denina word for bear is and name it Bayshore Bear, Park. And that way you check more boxes and it's more inclusive. And they were very receptive, but I think the commission, if that naming came to us, we could make that recommendation to add an indigenous element to the name.
Yeah. And that's what I think is going to be really challenging about this is how does that process work and what does it look like? And this is why it can become political because people are like, they're trying to rewrite the history of our city, right? But I also think that it's that what will hopefully happen is people will start to come forward just like this and say, hey, I don't like the name of that park. Can you guys think about a different name for that? Or I'd like, you know what I mean? So it's not just people coming for their relatives, but hopefully, and then you're supposed to hold some public dialogue events, right? So that would be really interesting too, is to be able to bring things forward and to generate ideas and what things could be named something different,
So a few years ago, there was a proposal to rename Fairview Park, which is near Fairview Elementary School, a little park, because there's also Fairview Lions Park just down the road, and the police were getting confused. And the community council in the neighborhood was not supporting it to change the name. So the way we worked with them was we renamed it Fairview Delga Park, because Delga is the Upper Cook Inlet Athabascan word for Denina, Athabascan word for raven. And so the park has a raven theme. Now it has a 5-foot raven. And so it kept that place, that sense of identity and history for the neighborhood, but you added to it. So that is something as a commission, I think we can look at is we don't have to accept a proposal. We can suggest modifying it or recommend modifying a proposal.
There could be a call for naming. You could, send something out.
Yeah.
Yeah, ask people to send their ideas, send their requests, send that sort of thing. So you can get it generated from the public itself.
I think it would be, I don't know what the other commissioners think, but as once we get everything figured out and we get our processes worked out, it might be nice to publicize the commission and that we're here and, because I think I've been hearing a lot from different community groups about namings or renamings. And I think we're in that position now. It used to be the code said you couldn't rename for 20 years. I don't know if that's in the new code or not. I don't believe it is. But I think we're going to start getting requests for renaming. I think a lot of people don't know how the process worked. This is why in the past, it was those who understood how government worked, who understood the process, who had connections that used the system. So how do we make it more accessible for persons who may not know how to use the system?
And then in the code, did we also suggest that if it is someone's name, that we look at smaller
Yes.
things?
Like instead of renaming the whole park after them, the preference would be to name the garden or the plaza or some, an element within it, or if it's a public building, the name the atrium or a conference room or something. The goal is not to name, for, the priority is not naming the whole facility for an individual.
Right, so that's, I think, if you think about 20 years from now, as you're walking down the street and you're looking at the names of things, that they would likely be landscapes, or they would be indigenous names, or they would be like thought, like, you know what I mean? That it wouldn't be Joe and Fred and Ted and Bill and John and, you know, everything is that would be the idea, is I think from, as an identity of a city, your names begin to represent your city in some ways.
Yes.
Stories or history that happened.
Yeah.
All right, anything else on the submission form?
I will, like I said, put the link of the local landmark ordinance and, you guys can take a look at that.
Let's just email it directly to
And
me.
Jamie's gonna, mail it, anything mailed to Jamie, and she will the clerk's office will distribute to us. And Jamie's gonna send out a revised draft nomination form
Yes.
before our next meeting.
And then did you want to, I've emailed, members Benel and Con, the goals and strategy development
Yes,
graphic, and then was there gonna be a subcommittee that was gonna review the vision for naming of public places? Or
I
did you just want me
I think
to?
we're just going to,
Okay, I'm gonna email that to everyone along with the link that, member Benel sends and,
and we'll come prepared to discuss it,
At the
edit
next meeting.
and approve at the next meeting.
Sure.
And then I put my email in the chat if people don't have the chat.
Awesome. So our next item is our regular meetings. So does 4:00 on a Wednesday work for people?
Works for me.
In general, when I'm traveling on Wednesdays. Because we fly out.
So,
So Wednesdays doesn't always work.
so Thursdays?
I'm good with Thursdays.
Can we have the option of either in a hybrid? Because
Oh, yeah.
we weren't given this
Yeah.
option before today.
hybrid's easier in here, right, Jasmine?
So
Or you have more tech in 155 that makes hybrid not so fun.
4 PM on a Thursday? Which Thursday of the month? First, second, third, fourth? Or does it matter?
It doesn't matter to me right now.
Is there one that works best for the clerk's office?
Just say that the first Thursday, well, we're doing it at 2:40, so it's on P-TAB is in 155.
Oh,
We're doing
I
it
would
here.
say the second Thursday, because I have something every second Wednesday that I have to do in Anchorage, so I can't travel on the second Wednesday. It's actually the second Wednesday. It's after this. It's 7:00.
Okay,
So maybe this does work. Second Wednesday at 4
okay.
does actually
Does
work.
that work for everybody?
But
Second
this is what,
Wednesday?
the first?
Sure.
The second Wednesday of the
Okay,
So the second Wednesday of the
Second
month would be
Wednesday
the
of the month.
14th.
Yeah, because the 14th, I have something that I have to do, and the second Wednesday of next month, I have to do in Anchorage, and so I already know that I can't go to a village on the second Wednesday.
So the second Wednesday
of every month,
of every month works, and
4 PM and
in that
2:40?
week where we could have 155, that would be
Oh,
June 11.
155.
Yeah. That way you can have.
Is it a
public
nicer building?
Yeah, this is kind of.
Yeah.
Small.
Wednesday,
Perfect.
nope, the downtown community council has it again on the 9th of July.
Second Wednesday?
Because they may have just avoided 2nd of July.
Oh, because of the holiday?
Yeah,
Well, we could meet here for that meeting.
Yep.
But we could do the second Wednesday every month, and in July, we could meet in
Meet
this
here.
room instead of
sure,
one
yeah, that
fifty-five.
works.
Perfect.
Yeah, so second Wednesday from 4 to 6.
All right, and with that, member comments. Any comments, Cuckoo? Christine?
I think it's gonna be fun. Yeah.
I'll bring snacks next meeting. All right. Anybody
And,
else?
Like I said, I put my email in the chat. It's the BlackRock one. So if you guys can send that over to Selma, then she and I can meet up.
I've already sent you that.
Okay, perfect.
Cool. Cuckoo, any comments?
No, I'm just very excited. I was thinking earlier that I should have mentioned the importance of names, considering my name is Cuckoo and I've lived with it for 30 years. And you know, this is just such a like personal thing. And so I'm just so invested in this. And, you know, studying public policy at UAA, like I'm so connected here and I'm just so excited to be, you know, serving here with you all. That's what I've been thinking in the back of my head this entire time.
We're excited to be working with you.
Thanks, Daryl.
Any other comments, Jennifer, Selma?
I guess one thing that I wanted to ask about, I don't remember if the code, you obviously can still name things after people that are deceased.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Do you prevent people from naming things after people that are alive? Is there already a
No.
restriction against that?
No. It specifically says it's not preferred, I think is how it's worded. While it's not preferred, it's not prohibited.
And I would definitely recommend going through and reading this again, because as I'm reading it now, it's reminding me a lot of things, so.
That was one, well, that was just something that I wanted to bring up, was that you had this, you know, Centennial Park that you're, you know, I think we should change this. I have a real bias towards not naming things after people that are still alive.
Yeah.
Because yes, they might have done this amazing thing and now you want to name it after them, but they're still going to be here for 30, 40 years and they might do something that you wouldn't want to name that after them.
Exactly.
So
That
has
happened in Nevada.
That has happened, yes. And
Yes.
the code does say, one of the things when Cameron and the assembly changed the code was now you can't name something for somebody until at least 36 months after they passed. So it gives a little cooling off period. Things aren't quite as emotional.
that's good. Anyway, other than that, I'm excited to be here and looking forward to it. Thanks for working with my travel schedule.
Selma, any thoughts?
No comments.
Cameron?
Just, yeah, I'm excited too to help out and to provide any support that I can. And I'm really looking forward to, as I'm reading through this, kind of seeing this process mapped out, you know, like there's obviously a timeline here. There's, you know, and then once you're ready to like let the world know we're here, you know, but be ready, right? Because then you're going to start getting people saying, hey, I got an idea, you know, that sort of thing. So getting your sort of all your stuff organized and figured out. And then at some point, you know, announcing, you know, that we're open for business, you know, so let us know we're here. And then figuring out how to do that. And then just the only other thing I would say is let me know how I can support you from the assembly side, you know, if knowing whenever we do these things, they don't always line up perfectly with timing, right? And so the August, you know, time frame, that would be something to think about right away is what can you do between now and then, you know? And so we can set up some realistic expectations for the assembly so that communication is really, really good. And then I can help to be a bridge between this group and the assembly as well. We can, for instance, this week we have a rules committee, which is sort of a general place for the assembly to update each other on things. So I'll do a little quick update at the rules committee this week and just say, hey, the naming commission is just getting started and give them just a little bit. But I can also just help in the communication between this group and the assembly until you figure out whether one of you guys want to do that.
Once we get the vision statement and, you know, our goals and strategy and we get a little bit further along, you think it'd be beneficial if we have a meeting with the assembly?
Yeah, it'd be really great. So once you're ready to do that, we could have you come to the rules committee or we could have you do a work session of some kind but figuring out when you're ready to do that, because they'll have lots of cool questions and be very curious about it. So,
And I think it'd be great for the assembly members to meet the commissioners and
Yeah.
introduce yourselves and
Yeah.
talk about your passion for public name.
Yeah.
So, Jasmine, you didn't introduce yourself. You're sitting over there.
Deputy clerk. I've been with the clerk's office since 2022. A little background about me, I have a bachelor's in healthcare science, and then I joined the military. I was in Intel, got out, and now I'm here. So, here if you guys need anything.
And we appreciate your support. Anything else? Public comments up? Well, motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Jennifer moved,
Second.
Second.
Thelma seconded, Christine thirded. Any opposition?
Everybody's favorite motion.
We're adjourned. Thank you all.
See you.